Okay, let's see here. Mm-mm. All right. So this is the Composite, season 5, episode 5. And this is part 2 of a wonderful interview with writer, cultural historian, and freelance journalist Zack Kopp. And we're on Zoom. So this will be reposted. The replay of this will be posted on Instagram and YouTube, but we're on Zoom. So as soon as Zack is able to hop in from the waiting room, we will be ready to rock and roll. Okay. Okay. Let me just email Zack. All right. Okay, just a sec here. You know, this podcasting life quite interesting. Okay, so just getting our captions going here and let me invite him again. Okay, just a sec. Now, the funny part will be, will Deanne figure out how to edit my shenanigans out of the interview? I think we're at a 50-50 there. Okay. Reply. Okay. Okay. All right. So, of course, the invitation did not go to him. So I just sent that over to his email. And we should, yes, we are ready to go. Excellent. Okay. All right. Much easier the second time around here.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know why my video is not showing up. It's all right though.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I
Yeah.
guess I turned it around.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, is it?
There we go. Awesome.
Yeah. So I can either I figure like talk about zines, read an excerpt. We can do them in either order. Probably the excerpt first, then the zines,
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
unless there's some any more. Anything else you wanted to talk about?
I have a couple more questions, but I'll see how we're doing for time because I right before you hopped on, I said to whoever watches this replay, I was like, now the question is, will Deanne figure out how to edit her shenanigans out of the picture? And I said
Oh,
it's a
sure.
toss up. It's 50-50 here. So all of that being said, if we could wrap up our conversation in this second part, then I think I have a little bit a better shot of getting some clean clips out of it.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I think
let's hear an
that's a
excerpt and
good
then we can
point.
talk about zines.
And I don't know if I've given people the correct impression yet of what kind of book this is, because I just kind of went off on a rambling tear there. But
No problem.
collection of interviews, and you can find it on Amazon it's on Barnes and Noble, it's on Walmart, and there's one called Shop Direct, but don't go to that one because I think that has to be provided by me, and I've only got 25 copies on the way to me right now. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, and here is an excerpt from the very beginning. Ready for this?
Yes.
What's a counterculture? Is that like terrorism? And I don't have the best vision, so let's hope I can get through this. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. All prescriptions come with side effects. Rare but serious reference. As a teenager in the 1980s, costumes of bygone countercultures were easily picked up in thrift stores, cast off symptoms of the eternal clash between freedom and power being draped over the furniture of Western culture, and you could live it yourself, LIY. By the time I entered high school, rebellion had become a commodity consumers identified with by hairstyles and listening preferences. And maybe it always had been that in the past, but now maybe that's all it was. I started as a heavy metal kid wearing the standard heavy metal uniform of denim jacket and long hair. I got into punk. I slashed a vent in the back of my jacket, wrote the Sex Pistols on it in black magic marker below it, then spray painted it red as if maybe I'm stabbed in the back by society or something, see? And shaved hair off the sides of my head with disposable razors in my parents' bathroom. You look like an idiot, said my dad. And I stuck a safety pin through my nose, which hurt like hell and didn't last long. A year later, I got into ska and became a rude boy, which entailed a whole new style of dress. Excuse me. I discovered the Beats as a teen in the mid to late 1980s, about 30 years after their heyday, starting with Jack Kerouac, who'd been inspired to write spontaneously by a letter he received from future merry prankster Neil Cassidy. I dropped out of high school in my junior year as a punk ska mod who sometimes wore a black beat turtleneck. In the 90s, I went by Henry Alarm Clock and hosted 3 or 4 readings on art jams every week. Then I took a long break. And when I finished grad school in 2008, I started hosting a variety show in Mutiny Information Cafe in Denver, formerly Mutiny Now. I met a lot of creative writers and musicians. Some of the younger ones had never heard of the Beat Generation or Bukowski, let alone John Fonte or even the 70s punk scene. In some cases, people world famous as recently as 20 years back were unknown to them. How do you start a counterculture? One kid asked. Is that the same thing as terrorism? He was wearing a polka dot miniskirt, a pair of plastic antenna, and butterfly wings. I guess they were butterfly wings. I told him the story of an artists collective called Bleeding TVs of Angels, Alarm Clock co-founded in the 90s. How we got the name. One day at the coffee house, my friend Devin said bleeding, then told me and our friend James Gonzalez to pick a word. That's how it happened. We hosted events without specified performers full of donated typewriters, art supplies, and instruments, and hung signs reading, "You are the show," to inspire improvised jams. I think we had 7 or 8 of these over a period of 5 or 6 years. This was our attempt to start our own Denver specific counterculture. The events were well attended, but never went beyond our underground history. We all grow up encompassed by the doings of various bygone big shots. And as an artist, I've always felt like the result of one or another previous counterculture in an endless war between law and joy, or some other cops and robbers conflict. And maybe you have too, haven't we all? I read all the beat stuff I found, Corso being my favorite because of his humor. I read Kerouac's On the Road. I read Neil Cassidy's Self-Conscious, The First Third. I prefer his unedited collected letters about growing up in Denver flop houses when Larimer Street was all pool halls, flops, and bars, and wondered why there wasn't a statue of Neil anywhere. A few years ago, I wrote an informal collection of all the Beats multiple collections to Denver, mostly through Neil, and now I'm connected to several of the Beats offspring and grandchildren myself. I'm friends with Neil's latest discovered orphan artist, Robert Hyatt, whose memoir, Beat Bastard, an adoptee's portfolio, was published by Boston's Big Table Publishing in 2017. Denver artist Mark Sink introduced me to his stepfather, lifelong Kerouac friend and correspondent, architect Edward D. White. I gave Ed a copy of the Denver beat scene and he quipped, "Can't beat that." "See, he's still got it," put in Mark from the side sotto voce. My interview with Neil's daughter, Jamie Cassidy Ratto, and her husband, Randy, is in here. John Fonte, April 8th, 1909 to May 8th, 1983, a writer who preceded the Beats, was most famous in the 1930s before disappearing with few exceptions into screenwriting. Fonte became known to me via anti-beat Charles Bukowski's description of finding his Ask the Dust in a Los Angeles library as having been like finding gold in the city dump. I was working for the Denver Examiner and became aware of a writer named Dan Fonte, February 19th, 1944, November 23rd, 2015. Found his email address somewhere and sent him one asking if he was John's son. Um, there's a lot there. This goes on a little ways. I don't know if I should keep reading it. I thought it was going to be shorter.
Oh, okay, no problem. Whatever you feel comfortable with. Great, great. And that, like I said, that'll give us an opportunity to do that as a clip and really boost this work. And while you're reading, while you were reading, excuse me, I took a couple of notes here. And what really struck me is when you were saying that you were meeting younger artists and writers and that they were completely ignorant of the beat generation. Can you talk a little bit about what you feel like folks that are unaware or uninitiated, what do you think they're missing?
They're just not familiar with that stuff, and they don't have a lineage to adhere to or to grow from. So they're just kind of reacting to the news broadcasts, and they don't have art, they don't have soul. I mean, I can't say that exactly, but they're not connected to the lineage that I know to be soul in creativity for the last 150 years. So don't I don't know. I mean, they're missing that. It
Mm-hmm.
may not mean as much to them. It obviously doesn't mean as much to them if they've gone along without it, not needing it. But I feel that what the idea of like belonging to a lineage of creative expression provides is hope and inspiration and in a vision to project, a vision to sort of keep keep on to continue along in the same vein of. I'm not sure what you're asking.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I'll rephrase. I guess that particular collective of artists, what do you think that they brought to culture in the sense of, okay, if you're unaware of them, then you're unaware of these qualities, of these themes, of these ways that they pushed,
I don't
the
think
culture.
anyone like needs to know about the beats, but I would say the most interesting thing about that story, that part of history, is the influence of a guy named Neil Cassidy. Are you familiar with that name?
A little bit, but not too much.
Jack Kerouac is famous for being the one who invented spontaneous prose. And the whole thing is just a reaction to a letter he received from Neil Cassidy, who was a guy who grew up in Denver, Colorado. He wasn't entirely a good guy. He was a womanizer. He was a car thief. He was a jailbird. He was, he had good points and bad points. Inspired, he wanted to become a writer, and he met a guy named Ed White and a guy named Hal Chase in a Denver pool hall. These two guys went to Columbia University where they met these writers, Kerouac and Ginsberg and Burroughs and all their friends. And they told Neil, look, they went back to Denver. They told Neil, hey, we've met these writers, they're going to be published. They can probably teach you about writing. Neil goes on a road trip to New York City with his girlfriend in a stolen car, most likely, maybe a borrowed car. And he just impresses all these cloistered Columbia University students with his force of personality. He was such a dynamic, such a vital person among all of these writers who have probably very interesting interior landscapes, but he's actually making a work of art out of his life compared to them. And they're all completely blown away. Kerouac discovers spontaneous prose. Kerouac goes on a road trip with him, writes a book called On the Road. Neil Cassidy is really he's getting his due after all this time. They finally published the Joan Anderson letter, which is the title or the colloquial title of the letter that inspired Kerouac. It was published by Eyewear Publishing a couple of years ago. Everyone should seek that out. After I wrote the Beat book, I came in contact with the children, Ed White's stepson, Neil Cassidy's daughter, and her husband. And I exchanged an email with Al Hinkle's daughter, Dawn Hinkle Davis. I was suddenly part of the crowd. And I would say the thing that's great about the Beat Generation that everyone ought to believe in is that a gang of friends can live for creativity and enlightenment and
Mhm.
make money doing it and have fun doing it and be happy doing it and overcome all their hang-ups doing it. And if they've got bad points, they can find good points too doing it. So
Amen.
rather than make it a history lesson where you got to know about this one thing, you should take the essence, or I would advise taking the essence of, what's productive, what's fortunate about that thing, because we want to be
Oh,
proactive
and that was the
more
spirit
than
of the
just,
question. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, we'd rather be proactive than retrospective. And that's not, I don't want to be known as a retrospectivist. I would like my chronicle to be an inspiration.
Oh,
Um,
totally. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean,
and I,
so thank you. That's a perfect answer because, when
um,
I'm saying, what might a younger generation be missing, I don't mean it in the sense of creating a hierarchy, but just
yeah,
rather,
no,
as someone who personally is still an emerging artist, what can our ancestors on the page, or,
absolutely.
on the screen or, in music, painting, so on and so forth, what can they share with us? What knowledge can they impart? That type of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I saw myself starting to go down that road, and I was like, man, I don't want to answer the question that way. So I'm glad we were able to pull it back. Um, I'm new at defending my thesis as a nonfiction author. Okay, so thanks for the practice.
No
Now I
problem.
know how to meet that question in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, no problem. And so that also gives us a great segue here into
Excellent.
talking about your greatest influences in terms of writing.
Okay, well, I really loved John. Okay. I let's see. I loved Kerouac because he taught me the lesson that you can novelize your own life. You can write about your own little life as if it were as important as the greatest novel you ever read. You can put that much heart and soul into your depiction of your experience, and that communicates to your the quality of the experience itself, the degree of attention you pay and like what you expect and what you invest. And it doesn't make it easy, but it's just a different angle. And I'm grateful to him for that. Um, I loved I loved that he could make the literal exceptional. And then when I started to read other writers who were not so, because Kerouac's trip was like, I'm God's messenger. I'm reporting this holy experience for God's diary, kind of. And then I run into other writers like Henry Miller, Charles Bukowski, John Fonte, even, who are more realists. But Fonte has so much humor. I loved Fonte because he worked so hard to make the reader feel at home in his writing. And I admit that I also just thought, oh, that's going to make a good essay title because his father was an architect. But hospitality is the quality I love about John Fonte's writing, hospitality. And punk rock and the punk ethic is freedom of spirit, is like not adhering to tradition, being brave in your originality, finding excellence in your self-taught expertise. Um,
I don't know as much about punk, but from what because I used to be a cultural studies junkie when I was in my first graduate program, but um from again the artists that I admire and from what I've been able to read, for me what was fascinating was the repurposing of commercial items in a completely
yeah, that's
subversive
awesome.
way. I loved that, whether it was safety pins or I mean that's the main thing that I'm thinking of because I read like several articles on it. I went down like this little rabbit hole, but yeah.
Yeah, and then like Fishbone was a punk band in a sense because it's
Mhm.
not it's not about sounding a certain way. It's just freedom of spirit and being unafraid to do it. And like you don't even have to know how to play your instrument, just find a way to make it sound like you want it to sound. And
Mhm.
that is the same lesson Neil Cassidy is teaching, is just to channel it from the source. Don't be a considered author, just be a creator, just be like a wellspring. So that's what I love about creativity, and I mean that's what I'm always trying to be. And sometimes you just end up sounding stupid. I mean, there was a few minutes ago when I tried to answer the question the wrong way, and I was like, I don't know what kind of answer you want. I just always kind of let it flow, and I usually end up where I'm going, where I'm
Um,
aiming.
this might feel a little random, but I was actually on a call earlier today, and it was an interview slash kind of script analysis with the director Boots Riley. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I've heard, yeah,
Yeah, and
I feel familiar.
his film Sorry to Bother You. It's funny
Oh
because
yes, so now I know exactly who he is. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And so it just occurs to me that so much of the qualities that, you're listing off were also things that he brought up in terms of his journey as an artist. And so I'm like, oh, would Sorry to Bother You, would that classify as kind of like a punk film? I don't know.
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, man, and like market research. I don't know if that was about telemarketing or market research, but
Yes,
I've been
telemarketing.
to a lot
Yeah.
of phone jobs, and market research has had a huge impact on one of my novels. My first novel, which was recently retitled, re-released, Reality Stars, whole different bag from Rare but Serious, also very good. But Boots Riley, hats off, great job. I'm sorry I didn't know exactly who you were. I remembered your name though, and Sorry to Bother You is a great film.
Yeah, I saw that in the theaters. I really enjoyed it.
I think I saw it on the computer, but I
Mhm.
enjoyed it too.
And the only reason I bring that up is because now, unfortunately, it's just like, well, I mean, the pandemic is not gone, but post lockdown, I always joke with my friends when I see a commercial and it goes, only in theaters. I'm like, that sounds very aggressive now. All of, the stuff that I tend to watch now is, on the computer pretty much.
But
Or
it's interesting. It's like, wow, only theaters. That never happens. I mean, it might.
yeah. So I think, before we wrap up, a couple of things here. Um,
I'm sorry.
no, no, go right
I
ahead.
want to say zines are the best way to
Oh yeah.
be a producer of a journal where you don't have to answer to a sponsor or an editor or a censor. Zines are going to be making a comeback in the next few years, I predict. And that's an informed prediction. And I want to say Alan Moore, you mentioned Alan Moore. The way the counterculture progresses beyond most people's idea of the 60s counterculture, it also includes punk and post punk and writing and all kinds of other things. And there's a guy named Pat Fish, goes by the Jazz Butcher. He was in a few other bands, and he grew up with Alan Moore in Northampton. They were great friends, and Alan Moore he's on my reading list currently. I just got a copy of Illuminations. I want to believe it's great. And if you look I don't know if you can see, but I got a few of his graphic novels back there. Watchmen and
Mm-hmm.
From Hell, and what else? There's one more. I don't know, but there's three of them back there. So Ellen Moore, and that's all. And now I'll answer anything. Thanks for letting me get that in.
Yeah, no problem. But you said something that I would want to ask you about.
There is an interview with Pat Fish in the book. Almost any celebrity name I've mentioned, there'll be an interview or an article about him in this book.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this is a very, very rich text. Excellent.
Yes,
Um,
I didn't promote it the way most authors of collections may have done, except for just now.
that's okay. So what would it mean, right, to promote a compilation of counterculture interviews like, your standard, I don't know, in terms of what's hot right now in creative nonfiction,
I
but
might
I
have
think
named
you went
more
about
names.
it in a genre accurate way. So
Let me send you a copy of the back cover because it's got all the names on it, and that will probably do a better job of promotion.
okay, yeah, that would be great. Because then I can put that, on social media and stuff and, give people a great sense of, again, the rich and denseness of the text. I wanted to follow up on your prediction about zines coming back. Say a little bit
Yeah.
more about that.
Well, it's just such a censored market right now. Uh,
Mm,
I have not had much luck talking publishers into publishing anything of mine that is a little bit outside what people want to read. So, like, they're only kind of publishing what people want to read. And that's why zines are a better idea than trying to live up to what's, fans of the popular like. And you'd rather just be original and, exceptional, and you don't want to just be as good as what's already popular. So I think zines are going to definitely be making a huge comeback. And sure, we've got this new, more censorious administration. It's probably going to get even worse, but it's been this way for at least 10 years already, that the more original, the more unique something is, it has to have a connection to make it in. If you're just some guy, you have to try and try and try and try. And I feel like it's maybe just barely starting to work in my case, but I don't know. So the zine, I guess it's a transvaluation of values where you're putting out a zine to please people, to be making a gesture of friendship, to be appreciated, more so than to get famous or to become wealthy or to be more secure in society. And you just sort of have to learn to depend on that flow for your security instead, or at least in part, as well as the other.
so, I don't know if I can make this leap, but there's something about your response. And as you were talking, I was like, is there something about, authoritarianism that it creates a breeding ground for counterculture.
Well, I
Um,
was just thinking exactly the same.
okay.
Absolutely.
All right,
Yes,
cool.
every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's going to take the form of a counterculture in this case, but there's going to be inevitably, chemically speaking, the laws of physics are going to produce a counterbalance. So people are either going to do it with isolation, be happy isolated, or they're going to do it with creative expression, or they're going to do it with activism, or they're going to do it with atavism. There's a story that I didn't put in this book that I only just researched and wish I had written an article about in time to put it in. It's another answer to what is a counterculture. The expression nature boy, I don't know if it may have originated with that song by Nat King Cole, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it predated that song, but that song, those lyrics were given to him by a guy named Eden Abe, who lived in the hills, in the Hollywood Hills, and wore sandals and wore a long robe and grew his hair out and had a beard. And he started, I think he was the first, or if not the first, the prominent figure in a countercultural group called the Nature Boys in LA. And Jack Kerouac writes about it in passing in the Dharma Bums, but they never got famous. They were before the Beat Generation, they were before the hippies. They were like two countercultures before the hippies, but they were doing exactly the same thing. Kind of like being Rastafarians without the religion, just relating to nature as divinity, relating to health food and nature. And I think they were nudists, at least some of them, and probably
I've
the
heard that term before.
pioneers of
Yeah.
that whole scene. Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
you've heard nudists referred to as naturalists. I never knew. I thought it was just a polite term for nudists, but maybe it goes back to Eden Abe. But like he wasn't a nudist necessarily. He collaborated with Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys on the
Mm-hmm.
album Smile, and he's recorded a couple albums of his own that are like really very listenable. That's Eden,
Wow.
Ahbez, Edenahbez.
Okay.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I'm
No, no,
terrible.
no, 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 no. This is great. Think I'm just adding to my reading slash listening
Right on.
list here. Um, and then so before we wrap up, Zach, if you would like to, if we could touch a bit on freelancing, because it sounds like that you're retired from freelancing now, that you're not freelancing anymore. So if you could talk a
No,
little bit about, how you made that decision to go ahead and wrap up with freelancing, and then maybe one or two pieces of advice that you would give writers who are looking to break into freelancing.
so Please Kill Me went out of business, and I still write occasionally for a rock magazine out of Slovenia called It's Psychedelic Baby. Some of these articles also were first printed in there. Um, and I don't know that I've retired from it. I'm just not giving it so much of my attention as I was.
Okay.
I write most regularly for a magazine called Rain Taxi Review.
Oh yeah, I
So
know.
that's mostly literary stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I just submitted an article, a review of Whitley Strieber's new book, The Fourth Mind. Look for that. They haven't accepted it yet. I hope they print it. Um, there's gonna be an interview with Ron Whitehead in Rain Taxi coming up, and something else. But the advice I would give is just approach the editor, send the editor a well-written query letter. I guess you probably ought to write unless at least line up your interview or your article first. You might not have to have it already written, but write a nice query letter to the editor proposing the article or the interview, describing it, eloquently in as literary a manner as possible, and explain why it's going to get read, why people are going to want to read it, enjoy reading it, what it provides. just a little sales pitch like that,
Mm-hmm.
um, in a respectful tone, and but don't be obsequious. Just be respectful and punch up the good points, and say, get back to me. Thanks. I mean, everyone's got their own idea, their idea of the ideal attitude to take, but just take that lovable writer attitude and put it on the paper and hit send.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it sounds like because of who you've reached out to for interviews, um have you ever been nervous, as you're sending those emails like, oh, this person is just like a really huge name. I don't know if they're going to get back to me.
Well, I'm still trying. Well, I don't want to jinx it. I mean, there are people who have not yet fully said yes to my invitation, but sometimes they'll respond to a post, and I haven't given up. Let's see, there's got to be someone. Well, David Johansen from the New York Dolls, he never answered my email. I really would have enjoyed interviewing him, and I just found out today he's having some health issues. So what a shame.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a few like that, but I've been pretty lucky. And I think it's all in the spirit. It's all in the way you do it.
I think that's a wonderful note for us to end on. This has been phenomenal. What a privilege. Thank
What a
you so
privilege. Thank
much,
you.
Zack
You're very
Kopp.
welcome.
Thank you for joining us here at the Composite Season 5, Episode 5. And I'll let you know when everything's posted. And if you can send me that back cover, I'm more than happy to blast that over social media. This
Super
sounds like
cool.
such
Thank
a
you.
treat to be able to read these interviews.
All right. Thanks very much for having me on, and thanks everyone for listening. Have a great evening.
Okay, you too. Take it easy. Okay. And, for the folks that watch the replay, definitely check out Zach's newest work, Rare But Serious. And the links will be posted, like I said, on social media. Until next time, bye.